Well, hello. Hi, Stephen and Tracy. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited about this. For those of you who know me, and I guess who don't, this sexy voice that I have today is not my normal voice. I'm a little hoarse, but I'm happy that my voice has almost fully recovered, that we could actually do this interview today. So today I have with me Traci Asher and Stephen Starkman. And I hope that today that this all finds you well, because we're very excited to be doing this presentation. I'm not going to give that much of an introduction for myself. There will be some introductions below in this recording. And I also have some on my website too, if anyone wants to find a little more about me. But I am a photo professional who does work with photographers to produce photo books. And as with many artists, I'm also always striving to find a purpose with my life and my art and my guidance. So I'm often delighted with art for art's sakes, but I'm very excited to find projects that reach a broader audience, to where it can exact change in the viewer and also their surroundings in their life. And that's why I find myself today here with Traci Asher and Stephen Starkman. I have to have a little caveat here too, that I've worked with both Traci and Stephen too in a consulting capacity. I worked with Traci for a few years now and watched her project evolve into what will be a book that is coming up, we hope, in later 2022 or maybe early 2023. She'll speak about a little bit about her work in just a few minutes. And Stephen will also speak. I met Stephen recently as part of a photography class that photographer and educator Jason Langer taught. And Jason asked me to speak to the class. So that's how Stephen and I were introduced. Both of these artists have produced books about their journey with cancer to be used as tools to help others, as well as beautiful book objects. So I wanted to connect these two artists in a conversation today. And so we'll start with Traci, who will do a little introduction to her work and her project, One Cancer Patient. And then Stephen will tell us a little bit about his work. So Traci, welcome.
Okay. Hi. Well, first, let me say, Melanie, thank you so much for doing this. It's really important. And I'm really excited. And I'm really happy to meet Stephen and hear his story. I took a look at his images and some of the beautiful quotes in his book, and it's really inspiring. So I thank you for doing this. It's really, really cool. So you and I have been working on One Cancer Patient. I'll just talk about it briefly and then turn it back over to you guys. So, One Cancer Patient is a photographic series of which I am the subject. And I worked with different photographers and family and friends and selfies. And the photographer that worked with me the most and means the most to me is my father, who is Warren Pearlstein. And not only is he my father and one of the photographers, but he's been the biggest support for the project as an exhibit and as putting it together as a book with my thoughts and feelings and writings and diaries. So as a whole, One Cancer Patient is a photographic series. So far has been a gallery exhibit, but like you said, in the next few weeks, I hope to have it self-published in book form soon. It chronicles my 8-year journey with 3 metastatic breast cancer diagnoses. My personal and intimate images work together to ease fears of the unknown often experienced during the initial cancer diagnosis. With strength, beauty, and humor, The struggles of surgeries, hair loss, treatments, and everyday life are presented through raw imagery. Every step on a cancer journey can be scary, but as it's traveled, a calming wisdom is achievable. The wisdom in one cancer patient supports women currently fighting cancer, as well as thrivers navigating life after treatment. When we see ourselves represented in art, even amid our deepest battles, we find unity and courage. Even though every individual diagnosis creates its own story, we are each one cancer patient. And I think if anybody's interested, I think we'll probably see some of the images from my book later on and answer questions. And if anybody wants to see the whole show and keep in touch, I have a website and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, onecancerpatient.com or @onecancerpatient. I will turn it back over to you guys, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from Stephen about his project.
Great, thanks, Tracy. It's Stephen, and we're going to pass it over to you. And you're
Sure.
going to show more of your completed book project
That's right.
that's
So
been published.
that's right. So I'm a self-published author, and I've created a book called The Proximity of Mortality, a visual artist guide, a journey actually through cancer. So let me bring that up now. And it's just been released in November, and I'm pretty satisfied with how we've done. We've done pretty well. Sold about a third of it, and it's really a journey, as I say, about myself. Now it's in book format in this particular iteration, so we'll just go past sort of the dedication and all of that. And the forwards, and I'm very lucky to have forwards by some very outstanding people. The book itself is a collaboration with my designer. His name is Matthew Papa, and we sort of went into I'm sorry, I have a little trouble with words today because I'm just about to go in for brain surgery. So the book is really about my own view of the world after being diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. And the small cell lung cancer metastasized to my brain. And the brain basically just doesn't really want to let go of it. We have to do some surgery to find out what's going on in it. But I went out for the last year and a half and found images which were, I think to me, quite inducive of what the experience felt like. So it was a real rush to get this book done. I'll read you a little bit from this page. This work is about the end of my life. This is expected within the next few weeks or months. I began this project shortly after my initial diagnosis of cancer, and is a visual representation of having cancer using images that are both documentary and metaphorical. The images are mine, and the quotes and poems throughout the book are from other cancer patients. So I decided early on to open the book up to other cancer patients and let them have their voice. And they've made some very poignant statements, which Tracy was alluding to earlier. And the statements are quite personal. They're quite illuminating. but my overall reach and overall idea is to have some poetry in there too, is to have my own images speak for myself and reflect upon each day's, not every chronological day, but each day's feeling. These are some of the interior shots of the hospital with the quotes. I'll read you very quickly the quote on the right. To say I was scared would be an understatement. I was fearful. I felt hopeless. I did think I was going to die. I felt uneducated, clueless. I had so many questions and no answers. And that's from Jasmine. And in fact, that's very much true of the process of being diagnosed with cancer, deciding to make it a project, taking the project into book format, and sort of illuminating the feelings, or at least my personal feelings of each one. Now, you'll notice that I'm not describing the images. I'm not really captioning them. And that's because I really want people to reflect upon the images themselves, to meditate upon the images themselves. There's some interior shots again with myself holding onto an IV pole, which is to me, is very evocative. It's sort of like being in prison. And then there's some pictures that are kind of more threatening. And, when you talk about surgery, I never had surgery until what's coming up this weekend. The surgical repercussions are irrespective of where they are in your body, they're pretty severe. So lots of process went into the book. Lots of shooting when I could, when I had the strength to it. Lots of really I had visual effects where I couldn't see very clearly. And I sort of, tried to reproduce some of that later. Oops. More of the interior shots. I'll read you the one on the right again. No one can ever know, even if they too have had cancer, how you feel. You are alone in your journey, as no one has ever been you, your unique childhood, your unique personality, your unique coping mechanism. All anyone can ever be is scaffolding around you. You are alone, no matter how well supported you are. I have learned that I needed my own scaffolding to deal with my fears. And I found that and several of the other quotes from other cancer survivors were very poignant. So one of the techniques that I did try to use was switching from large format images across the page to smaller format images. Some of the larger ones give it a full bleed weight. Some of the smaller ones give it sort of a diminished approach. You have to kind of dive into it. But I found that the idea of having some surprise and some unpredictableness to the book really enhanced it. And the book, as I mentioned, is in 3 flavors. It's the nature photographs, such as this one. It's the poetry, such as what we see here. And it's also the pictures inside the hospital, either of myself or of the corridors. So this is my project. This is exactly how I felt, especially after the first round of chemo. And I'm really lucky enough and blessed enough to have finished the project and say all these things visually. It's really a tremendous honor to be able to make this book And there's no surprise, I rushed it. I put it in high gear. I didn't even think of having a marketing campaign. I just really wanted the book for myself in my own hands before anything might happen. So we have, a lot of opportunity to have some, real magical images, I think, which are non-representational. Yeah, that's me. And kind of in the book itself, which is a real joy. Perhaps I'm talking too much.
No, I
No.
think it's great. Like, it's interesting though, too, if you don't mind me interjecting a little bit right now, but the quotes that you selected when I was looking through the book, some of the ones that I kind of pulled out were also by Jasmine and Laura.
Yes.
I found those incredibly interesting. And you and I, when we met for a consulting meeting, we were talking about that. And the one of Jasmine in particular, no, of Laura in particular, that speaks about your own individual experience through this whole thing. And then the other one that I found interesting when I was looking back through it this morning was Peter's quote too, that talks about ringing the bell after chemotherapy treatment, but then all of a sudden, but then you realize almost like you're going into a new life, like you're a new person. This is really significantly changed, like who you are because of what you've gone through.
Yeah, my life was never the same after I was diagnosed, and that diagnosis changed everything. I was very lucky in the sense that I went to a small town hospital, was diagnosed there, but because of COVID, my wife couldn't join me, so I was by myself. And I have this very protective personality that I would be so concerned about her and her feelings that I was just very happy to be alone and sit through the day. So yeah, it changes everything. It does. And I'm sure that Traci can relate to this. It's a whole different life afterwards compared to before.
Absolutely. And, I was struck as you were reading passages from your book and seeing your images that, we deal with this juxtaposition that's impossible to explain to somebody who hasn't been through it, of wanting to be happy and peaceful at the same time as being really, really afraid and worried and anxious. And how do you connect those two things? And art therapy is an amazingly helpful way, even if you didn't think yourself as an artist.
Yes.
Right. And it struck me that your support system to put your images with all the forward, your oncologist, your friends, your loved ones, how you combined your entire support system into this project about you is incredible. How was it easy? How did you go through the process of picking and choosing, or were you just anything and everything that everybody sends me, it's going in?
And that's such a good question. When I started the project, I was in the middle, or I just had started chemotherapy, and that's nothing, and radiation at the same time, and it's very punishing. I really didn't think that I could finish the book. I really didn't think that it was a book. I thought it was just a project. I thought it was something I could humor myself with for a time. And then afterwards, I had the good news that the chemotherapy had worked, up until the point of the brain metastasis, if that's a word. Since I only play a doctor on TV, the reality is that you know, I needed to hurry it up, and as it was getting closer and closer and closer, I became less and less patient. I became like, you know, get this thing on the press. I mean, it's something that I want to see before something else happens. So it was a real process to transform it from a sort of a project into a fully formed object, and having that in my hands and having that, you know, maybe in some ways define who I am and what my legacy can be.
Yeah, there seems to be a chronology with some of the images equating to the journey through treatment, maybe diagnosis and treatment,
Yeah.
and coming out of treatment. But how do you view your narrative of the other images? Like how did you sequence and edit those?
So that was a big project because I had lots of images, but not many images because of my physical state. So it was almost more difficult to choose the right ones to sequence them than I really had the strength to do. So I did rely to some extent on my designer, and Matthew was a great collaborator in sort of setting it out and listening to my objections or criticisms and doing that. But I think that the sequencing was probably in some ways the most fun and the most uncertain all at the same time. So I'm very happy with the results, and the story is half told. I mean, the reality is that I have terminal cancer and there is no cure for it. So it depends on how long I can extend my life, but the story is really only half told at this point. And I don't know what will become of me. So, I mean, I do know, but I don't know. So it's a real challenge. It was a great project to really hang my hat on the way out the door. And I really do appreciate both of you for your kind words, and really appreciate the time that you've taken in sort of showing my work today. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to do it, and yours as well, Traci, because I think that they're both different tools to getting to the same end, which is providing support, comfort, knowledge, which is a very big thing. I mean, if I could talk about yours a little bit, Traci, too. I mean, I know you and I are trying to plan to do another interview later on, and we're not going to focus quite as much on your work, but I mean, I want to talk about the difference in the usefulness for both of them. Will you just describe a little bit about what your book is? Because yours is 236 pages or something
Yeah, yes.
now.
So yeah, I'm looking for maybe a couple of images to pop up there to give an idea that when I was first diagnosed 8 years ago with breast cancer, like Stephen touched on too, you have more questions than answers. If you've never been through something like this, like anything, it's scary, and you don't know, you've seen it in the movies, you've seen it on TV, and then it's whatever you see in your head, whatever you're making it up to. This is what it's going to feel like, this is what it's going to look like, and it's going to be awful and just all the worst possible things you can imagine. And I realized with having me being in the entertainment industry, my dad being a photographer, I always documented. And I wished that there was something that would help me that was straightforward to just show me this is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. This is what to expect. And then it was like, well, maybe that's something I could do. I can show loved ones, caregivers, cancer patients, this is what chemo looks like. This is what radiation looks like. This is what it looks like when you lose your hair. Let me see if I can give an example of the day after day one, or I'm sorry, this one is called Sitting Up. It's the day after a mastectomy. It's not very graphic. There's no nudity. A little graphic if you're squeamish from blood. But it's contained. So here, this is Sitting Up. This is what it looks like the day after a mastectomy.
Oh, I'm not seeing this screen
Oh,
now.
no? Let me
Yeah.
see. Let me try again. Oh, I know what I did. Here we go. I got it. Here we go. Do you see it?
Yes.
Did it work? Okay. Sitting up, day after surgery. I'll just throw up a couple, and then I talked about humor. Humor is very important. With people that you care, about. It's good to laugh always, no matter my very first day of chemo. And
And you had a few photographers who were documenting you along the way.
Yes, I had lots of, I started with a woman to help me through the breast cancer photography, and lots of friends and selfies along the way. And then of course, my dad, who's a photographer, was always, he traveled in to help. He was one of my biggest caregivers. And although he didn't necessarily want to photograph his daughter going through this, he was the right person for the job, whether he believed it at the beginning or not. By the end, by today, he believes it. He was the right person for the job.
Yeah, because
And
it probably, just as we were talking about with Stephen earlier, about this being like somewhat of a distraction for, his upcoming surgery. And, it was probably somewhat of a distraction for your father. And he got to, for him, it's another one of those things of like artist therapy or artist catharsis or artist process.
right. And we touch on a lot, along with what it looks like, how let's see, where's
And Stephen has a similar image in there
yes, this
too,
is,
which must be like incredibly frightening.
It's it's very evocative of that day that I had in that mask that they let me take home, and it's sitting in my closet with a baseball hat on it now.
yeah, right. It's
So what you're saying about sense of humor is so important, because everything else just drains from you. You're scared to death. And I also beautiful photographs, by the way. They really are. They're really, really beautiful. And I had the same fear of the unknown, the fear of people being very busy and very rushed and very, consumed with time, and not being able to ask all the time to your own satisfaction what they're doing.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, and the other thing about imagery, is like we keep saying, unless you've been through it, it's very hard to explain. But people want to understand.
Yeah,
They don't know the right words to say, typically, and they don't know they don't know how to talk about it, right? So with your images, it gives them like you said, metaphors
Mm.
to think about, other ways to think about it, so they don't have to come up and say scary words,
right.
words that they don't want to evoke something in themselves or you.
Yeah.
And now they have a distraction, something to talk about, something beautiful to look at and discuss with you. And then if you, or if they have the book and it's another patient, wants to have ways to talk about the situation without talking about the situation.
And that's precisely one of my goals, was to make sure it was accessible to caregivers and to people who might not have a caregiver who is as tuned in or as sensitive, and say, this book reminds me of things that I've experienced, or I've felt, or feeling overwhelmed, or just not being able to see clearly. Have a look at it. It's a conversation starter, and it really allows you to talk about something without having to mention it. And
Yeah.
it's so true.
I think even just preparing today for this interview, just because I'm in the middle of, two people who have gone through something similar, but just trying to figure out how to make sure I'm very respectful of both of you, and your different experiences. And then that I keep thinking of that quote that Laura says, that you can't know. But the nice thing about both of your books, is that, it does, at least, Stephen, you mentioned in the introduction to yours that it's for anyone who's gone through, a long-term illness. And maybe that's not always the case. It could be also just for people who are going through anything of struggle in their life, you know? And Tracy's a little more specific because it's almost like a handbook of what you're going to experience. And there's incredible value in reading that. I learned an amazing amount from doing it and from reading it. But then yours is for the cancer, I don't like to, but but the person who's being treated for cancer, receiving the diagnosis, but also the caregivers. And I think they both kind of go under that same umbrella, but yours, I think, can extend to beyond, because you did try to make it an art book. You're an artist too. You work with a great art designer. And that's another thing I ask you about, like laying out the images, because I love the idea of narrative and how you want to leave people, because you do leave it, with literally your words, but also probably the images of the idea of hope, because you present yourself as like this youthful, hopeful human being who had no idea of the concept of the world. And probably it's another metaphor in some ways of like, it's it is yourself, but it's a surrogate for yourself too, of someone who's filled with hope. And I think probably part of your narrative leads people to that point too. Or I could be making things up. But it feels like that the visual images kind of lead you to that point. So I think it can be a useful tool for a wide variety of people.
Yeah. Yeah. They both are in different ways. Two different perspectives on the same thing. very much so. And I remember, Melanie, when you mentioned Traci in the class that we took, I was sitting there at the edge of my chair going, this sounds so familiar. This is so incredibly what I experienced and what I've been through. But so I'm, I'm really glad to be here and meet you, Traci, and make sure that we connect on some level. That's really important to me. It's there's a sense of community. I mean, if you know people with cancer or people who have gone through it, there is a sense of community, and there's hundreds of thousands of people with cancer in the United States alone. So it's kind of a hidden community, but everyone knows somebody who knows somebody.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's an unspoken truth that it's a huge medical effort to try to keep these people alive and functional and doing well.
Mhm. But I think it's also the being able to have something of meaning to hold on to kind of let go of some of these thoughts and feelings. And it feels like Traci used, you use photography a lot, and Traci photography through other people, but also her journaling. So these are both really great tools, but you also found you made an end product, but it's also about the process along the way of how did you deal with this in your own mind and your own spirit and emotionally. And I think, Traci, you did a lot of journaling as part of yours.
Oh yeah. I early on, the first photographer that I had, her name is Georgina. And she did the breast cancer, the beginnings with the nudity and all that kind of stuff. And she was fantastic. She also herself was a breast cancer thriver. So we bonded on that too. She was able to help me. She had already been through it a little bit. So that was really cool. And she was the one that pushed me to journal. And this was before I even had the idea. I mean, I was just photographing stuff thinking, oh, it'll be fun to have before and after pictures, not realizing the entire journey I was about to go on, and that I would want to document all of it. It's
Mhm.
in my DNA. And so yeah, it was a happy accident, and it turned into something much bigger, and I'm really proud of it. So yeah, it's my thoughts, and there's thoughts and feelings and pragmatism all sort of balled up into one.
Mhm.
So hopefully I'm hoping people can see the images, read it, and take notes and highlight and fold pages, take it to your oncologist, show them a picture and say, is this what it's gonna look like? Is this true? Things you wouldn't have maybe thought about before because you've never been through it.
Mhm.
Make a mess out of it.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because we had talked about the intention with your book, and then I think the intention with Stephen's, they're just two totally different objects. And it's interesting but they're both thoughts, feelings, and pragmatism, like you just mentioned. I think that both of them have both of those in there, but in two totally different vehicles. Do you, I think we're gonna maybe start to wrap up. We could probably talk for a long, long time, but I just want to know if you have any more thoughts that you'd like to share about your process using art, or about the book that you are finishing and have finished already, that you might want to share with anyone who's watching today. So do you want to start, Stephen?
Sure. The process is much longer than it should be. We were all frustrated by it. But that's because I'm in a rush. So, sort of balance those two things. The process is supremely rewarding when you get to the end of it. And it's almost terribly frustrating when you're working up to it. So I'm so glad that I did this, and especially with my timing, this has been really a joy. And I say this not lightly. It's been a lifeline for me. This has helped me be something that I could not have been without it. So that makes a sense. I'll give it a plug if you want. I have a website, StephenStarkman.com, Stephen with a PH. And you can buy a copy of the book there. And everyone who does, I appreciate very, very much. And I'm thankful too. So it's quite a joy to be able to share it with people.
And you have about a third of the print run that's sold so far as of when we publish this. So get your copy.
Get a copy before it's done.
Yeah. And then Traci?
I just want to thank you again. And I'm so happy to have met Stephen and seen his book, and go check out his website and telling his story. I mean, so he has surgery in just a few days. We're talking hours, and that's not fun. But gosh, I mean, he's worked so hard. It's not easy, and he's got it right up until the big day and all the big days after the big day. And his attitude is contagious. And Melanie, who would have thought when we met that you would be one of mine, now Stephen's, a caregiver, a cheerleader, and putting this together in hours, a few days.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Well, you're both welcome. I mean, I think we've all gone through something in our life where most people probably have experienced challenges, and I've even done something like that a while back, where you're just like, who else is going through this, and who knows what I'm going through, and who can I turn to, and who can I talk to, just to have someone who knows something comparable to what you're going through. So I think that both of you have opened up like your life, your soul, also probably for selfish reasons, because art, like I said, art is catharsis, art for healing. So, but then you're willing to put it out there and share it with the world. So I think this is incredibly valuable to a lot of people. So I'm very happy that we could do this today and put it together. And then I did want to wrap up. I think I have one quote that there are the few Stevens quotes that he pulled, that he read, that I thought were fantastic. And then there's one from Traci's book, which may or may not change due to editing, but I'm going to read this little quote anyway. But and then I'll try and go slowly, because Stephen tells me all the time I speak too quickly. But and especially with the diminished voice. But so Traci's quote is, "Cancer does not define me, but I cannot deny the impact it's had on my adult life. I am more than a survivor. I am a thriver. As a thriver, I choose to look towards the future instead of clinging to the past. I use my experiences to learn from and grow, and I will not be limited by brokenness." I thought that was an incredible quote that's in the introduction to Traci's book. I hope that whomever watches this helps you in some sort of way. If you can, maybe support both of these artists too and pick up a copy of the book. If not, then we do hope that it supports you otherwise, and to know that there's other people out there who are not you, but who can help to support you. So thank you both. And we'll stop the recording and then say goodbye to both of you. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Melanie.